Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of the Congressional Western Caucus Chairman's Chat. I'm Chairman Dan Newhouse. Pleased to be with you again. This week, I'm just delighted to be joined with a great friend of mine from my neighboring state of Idaho, Mike Simpson from Idaho's second.
Yeah, we only have two, so it's you got a 50-50 chance of being right.
So Idaho 2. In your hometown is Blackfoot.
That's where I grew up, practiced dentistry when I was in the real world, and now we live in Idaho Falls, which is only 25 miles north of there.
So, and that's southeast Idaho. Southeast.
So when I wake up in the morning, if I look out the window, I can see, if it's clear day, I can see the peaks of the Tetons. So that's how far over it is.
Oh, wow. Beautiful country, I know that. But Mike is the chair of the Interior. See, how do we say that? The Subcommittee on Interior for the House Appropriations.
Yep.
So we're certainly pleased to have you with us to talk a little bit about that. So if you could give us a little background on what this Subcommittee on Interior is and what it does. Why should we care about that? Why is it important?
Well, it does a lot of good things, particularly from the West. In fact, we've always been concerned when we didn't have a Westerner in there as chairman, because we do the Forest Service and we do the BLM, and most of those lands are in the West. So it's very important to Western states that they understand what it's like to live in a state like Idaho. That's 64% federal land. 64%. And I think in Nevada it's 90-something%. So
we're only, I think, less than 30 in Washington.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's still a significant amount. When you come out here in the East Coast, there's not much public land out here. In fact, the reason a lot of us live in states in the West is not only do we like being out in the West, but we love our public lands. We like to recreate on them, we like to hike on them, we like to hunt on them, and all sorts of things. So we do, in the Interior and Related Agencies Subcommittee, we do the Forest Service, as I said, the BLM. We do, obviously, all of the stuff in the Secretary's agenda and what she deals with. And we also do the EPA. We do the USGS, Geological Survey. We also, a big part of our appropriation bill is we also do Indian Affairs. Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Health Services, Indian Law Enforcement, Indian Education. And that's a big part of our budget, frankly. And we also do some of the fun things like Smithsonian and the National Art Gallery and some things like that. So it has some fun parts of it. It has some really difficult parts of it too. The other thing that we do that's challenging our budget right now is we pay the wildfire fighters. And
yeah, you brought that up many times.
Yeah, and we've been trying to get a permanent fix for their pay scale, which we're going to do in this year's appropriation.
You know, I believe the origin of the Western Caucus has a lot to do with just exactly what you're talking about. The interaction of landowners and states that have a lot of federal lands in their district.
Yeah. When I first came, there was a congressman from Pennsylvania that was a member of the Western Caucus, and he always used to come. You know, the name implies that it's just Westerners that would be joining, but there are public lands in other states that our bills and stuff do affect. And he was from rural Pennsylvania. Oh, yeah. And he was a good member of the Western Caucus.
Yeah, good. Well, you know, we've got members from almost all the states.
Yeah.
We truly are, I don't know, accurately, we should say Western Caucus. We won't change the name.
Yeah.
But we have people from all over the country. So, Interior, EPA, Geological Service, a lot of different things. Tell us how, you know, if there's something that you disagree with from coming out of the administration of one of these agencies.
There's been a few of those things this year.
How does a subcommittee in appropriations deal with that? How do you push back? How do you express your will and maybe bend what they're trying to do closer to what you'd like to see?
Well, you know, you can do that through the appropriation process. It's not just me, it's all of the members that submit requests for language to stop the EPA from doing something or to not enforce a particular standard that they might put out that we don't agree with. So the appropriation process is sometimes how you get their attention. And that's obviously very important. I said, it's not just me. It is all of the Western members submit language, and we're going through all that language and what we can put in our bill and those types of things. But the EPA, we also do reprogrammings. Every subcommittee does. An agency comes in, they want to reprogram some money that you've appropriated to put someplace else. We have to sign off on those things. And the EPA came in year and a couple months ago and wanted to reorganize the whole EPA essentially. And we wouldn't sign off on it. We said, no, that's much more than a simple reprogramming to send some money over here to address a problem or something like that. So you need to do that through the authorizing committee and let them know what's going on and why you're reorganizing, and answer the questions they have before we're willing to fund it. So we do have those kind of back and forth with the different agencies and so forth. But with the EPA, it's kind of like the IRS and financial services bill. Everybody hates the EPA, and yet we do need an EPA. I think they enforce 27 different environmental laws. And so, just the easy ones they're not the easy ones to enforce, but the easy ones to memorize are the Clean Drinking Water Act, Clean Air Act, and a couple of those. And when someone told me one time, just get rid of the EPA, we don't need them, I told them, well, I'm kind of glad the Cuyahoga River hasn't started on fire spontaneously, and things like that. But the EPA has a tendency to get out of control and go, I think, way beyond the borders of what is authorized by Congress. Through the appropriation process, we try to bring them back within the sideboards of what the EPA should truly be doing.
I've been to countries that don't have anything similar to the EPA.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. I've come home thinking that I was grateful that we do have that. But you're right. Sometimes they get out of hand and we have to rein them back in.
Well, and one of the challenges is they're always an agency that the other agencies, when you're doing like the Hells Canyon Complex dam relicensing and stuff, well, the Forest Service and the BLM is involved in that, as is the BOR and the Army Corps of Engineers. All of those people are involved in relicensing. So is the EPA. And they can come to all sorts of agreements and stuff, and then the EPA will step in and say, nah, maybe not. Maybe we'll try something else. All the other agencies are kind of afraid of the EPA. And they just need to get back into doing what they've been authorized to do by Congress and do it in a reasonable way that the public understands.
So another thing that you're focused on a lot through the Department of Interior is something called payment in lieu of taxes.
Yes.
Which I've learned a lot from you, Chairman Simpson, about. But could you talk about a little bit why that's so important to states in the West, and how do we keep that working the way it should and solve it?
Yeah, I'd like to put payment in lieu of taxes on a mandatory funding project. So I think it's 600 million this year, went up about 85 million from the year before. But what that does, as the name suggests, it's in those states that have a great deal of public lands. It pays, and the federal government doesn't pay taxes on that federal land. It pays for county and school districts for taxes they might have otherwise gotten. What's interesting is 49 out of the 50 states get payment in lieu of taxes money. Some of them very small because they have very, very small amounts of land and stuff. But in the West, it's huge. Our counties, your school districts depend on that and knowing what that's going to be. That's why putting it on mandatory spending so that you wouldn't have to wait for Congress to act. As sometimes we don't get our bills done on time. Sometimes it takes a long time. But they would then know exactly what the payment is going to be. We had a chairman of the Interior Subcommittee that was the mayor of Alexandria here in DC, Jim Moran, good guy. One day we got talking about payment in lieu of taxes and secure rural schools and some of those things that are very important to public land states. And we had some witnesses and I was asking him questions and stuff. And Jim sat back and he was the chairman at the time. He says, I wasn't going to say anything about this. He said, but my constituents want to know why they have to pay for their schools and then they have to go pay for your schools too. And I had a binder with how much public land we have in Idaho that's non-taxable and how much they have in Virginia that's non-taxable. We actually tax ourselves at a higher tax rate than they do in Virginia, and we get much less money. And PILT makes up that difference. And Jim, to his credit, took the stuff home, read it that night, and came back and said, I didn't know what I was talking about. So it's 90% of his job is trying to get other people to understand the facts on the ground. Living in the West is different than living in the East.
Sure.
Even when you look at things like water, we have prior appropriation rights. They have riparian water rights,
Right.
So if you get talking water with someone in the East, they try to get rid of water. We try to save every drop.
Exactly. Ship some of that water from the east.
Yeah.
So I can tell you, Mike, I truly think Western United States is fortunate to have someone as passionate as you standing up for those issues that are important to us in an area, in a spot that's so key as being the chairman of the Interior Subcommittee of Appropriations. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And it's, like I said, those of us in the West have always worried when the chairman of the Interior Appropriation Committee comes from someplace that doesn't have a lot to do with public lands and stuff.
My guess is that doesn't happen very often.
Well, we had, and they're both good people. We had chairman before me was Shelley Pingree from Maine, and Betty McCollum from Minnesota, and David Joyce, the Republican, was chairman from Ohio. So we're getting back to the Western chairman, and I've been on this committee for 22 years, and it's one of my favorite committees because we deal with hard issues. We also have some fun things to do.
Good. So we have a short time here, so I thank you very much for being with us. Anything you'd like to share with our viewers that we haven't touched on? I'll give you an opportunity to say so, and then we'll let you go.
Well, what I would say is, and I say this to the employees out in the states, the state of Idaho, when I'm meeting with the Forest Service or BLM people, they're good people just trying to do a job. Sometimes they are made more difficult by some of the things we do here in Congress and stuff. But they are good people on the whole, trying to do a good job. You can work with them, and I would encourage anyone that has a problem with grazing rights or things like that to sit down with your BLM director and talk to them. And I think you'll find that they are receptive because these people live out in the West too. They know what the issues are, and so I enjoy working with the employees from the Forest Service and BLM and the other agencies.
Good. Well, thank you for that. Mike Simpson,
Thank you.
Idaho's 2nd Congressional District, Chairman of the Interior Subcommittee on Appropriations. Thanks for joining me for the Chairman's Chat, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the Congressional Western Caucus Chairman's Chat.